Seattle, the Emerald City, known for its lush greenery, vibrant culture, and the iconic Space Needle piercing the skyline, but beneath this picturesque facade, a darkness lurked. A shadow fell upon the city and its surrounding areas in the early 1980s, a darkness that would haunt the region for decades to come. The Green River, a seemingly tranquil waterway winding its way through the landscape, became a dumping ground for the unspeakable. Its verdant banks, once a symbol of nature's beauty, transformed into a chilling crime scene. The tranquility of the water belied the horrors concealed beneath its surface. The discovery of the first victims sent shockwaves through the community. They were young women, most of them living on the fringes of society, their lives tragically cut short. Fear and uncertainty gripped the region as the body count grew, each victim a grim reminder of the predator stalking their midst. The authorities, faced with a crime of unprecedented scale, launched a massive investigation. The Green River Killer, as the media dubbed him, became a chilling enigma. His motives were unclear, his methods brutal. But one thing was certain, he was hunting on the streets of Seattle and beyond. The initial discoveries were just the tip of a horrifying iceberg. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a pattern of brutality that sent chills down their spines. The victims were often found posed, discarded like broken dolls, their bodies bearing the marks of a monster. The Green River Killer didn't discriminate in his choice of victims. They were daughters, sisters, friends, but they were also marginalized, often overlooked by society. Many were sex workers or runaways, their disappearances barely registering on the radar of a world too busy to notice. Their families, however, felt the loss acutely. They were left with agonizing questions, haunted by the unknown fate of their loved ones. The lack of answers only amplified their pain, turning grief into a relentless tormentor. The Green River Killer case was a stark reminder that even in a bustling metropolis like Seattle, darkness could lurk in the shadows, preying on the vulnerable and forgotten. The city's idyllic image was forever tainted, a chilling reminder that evil could flourish anywhere. What made the Green River Killer case even more unsettling was the realization that the perpetrator wasn't some shadowy figure lurking in the darkest corners of society. He wasn't a monster hiding in plain sight. He was a seemingly ordinary man, living an ordinary life, Gary Ridgway. The name would later become synonymous with horror, but at the time he was just another face in the crowd. A truck painter by trade, he blended seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life. His ordinariness became his most effective weapon. It allowed him to move undetected, to earn the trust of his victims, to live a double life that defied comprehension. Behind the facade of normalcy, a darkness festered, a darkness that would claim the lives of dozens of women. The realization that a serial killer could be so deeply embedded in society sent shockwaves through the nation. It shattered the illusion that evil was easily identifiable, that monsters wore their wickedness on their sleeves. The Green River Killer case quickly became one of the largest and most complex investigations in American history. Law enforcement agencies from across the region poured resources into the case, determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. Detectives worked tirelessly, following every lead, interviewing countless witnesses, and painstakingly piecing together the puzzle of the killer's movements. The pressure was immense. Each passing day brought the fear of another victim, another family shattered by grief. The investigation was a race against time, a desperate search for answers in a labyrinth of dead ends and false leads. The killer, however, seemed always one step ahead, his crimes meticulously planned, his tracks expertly covered. Despite the challenges, the investigators refused to give up hope. They clung to the belief that even the most cunning predator would eventually make a mistake, that justice, though slow, would ultimately be served. Section 5. A trail of silent victims. As the investigation dragged on, the list of victims continued to grow. Each name added to the grim tally, a stark reminder of the human cost of the Green River Killer's reign of terror. The victims came from all walks of life, but they shared a common vulnerability. They were marginalized, living on the fringes of society. Many were engaged in sex work, a dangerous profession that often put them at risk. Their lives, though considered disposable by some, were no less valuable. They had dreams, aspirations, and loved ones who grieved their loss. The Green River killer case exposed the dark underbelly of society, the indifference and neglect that allowed such atrocities to occur. The case became a rallying cry for change, a demand for greater protection and recognition for vulnerable communities. The victims, though silenced, became symbols of a system that had failed them, a system in desperate need of reform. Section 6, Decades of Darkness. Years turned into a decade, and still the Green River killer remained elusive. The case, once a constant fixture in the news, began to fade from public consciousness. But for the families of the victims, the pain remained as raw as ever. The lack of answers gnawed at them, the uncertainty a heavy weight on their hearts. They clung to the hope that their loved ones would be found, that the person responsible for their pain would be brought to justice. The Green River killer case became a chilling reminder that some wounds never truly heal, that the passage of time doesn't always diminish the pain of loss. It was a testament to the enduring power of hope, the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, light would eventually break through. Little did they know that the answer to their prayers lay dormant, hidden within the very evidence collected years earlier. The advent of DNA technology would soon change everything, breathing new life into the investigation and offering a glimmer of hope in the seemingly endless darkness. Section 1, A City on Edge. As the body count rose, so did the tension in Seattle and its surrounding areas. Fear became a constant companion, a shadow that followed residents as they went about their daily lives. The Green River killer wasn't just a figment of nightmares anymore, he was a terrifying reality. Parents kept a tighter grip on their children's hands, their eyes scanning the streets for any sign of danger. Women, especially those who resembled the victims, lived in a state of heightened alert, their sense of security shattered. The once familiar streets now seemed menacing, every shadow a potential hiding place for a monster. The Green River itself, once a source of tranquility, became a symbol of dread, its currents whispering tales of unspeakable horror. The killer's ability to evade capture only amplified the sense of fear. He moved like a phantom, striking without warning and vanishing without a trace. The city was holding its breath, waiting for the next horrifying discovery. The investigation was relentless, fueled by a mixture of determination and desperation. Detectives worked around the clock, following every lead, no matter how insignificant it seemed. The walls of their makeshift headquarters were plastered with photos of the victims. Each photo told a story, a life cut tragically short. There was Mary, a young mother who dreamed of opening a bakery, and Wendy, a talented artist who hoped to travel the world. Their faces, frozen in time, served as a constant reminder of the stakes. The detectives saw beyond the statistics, beyond the grim tally of bodies. They saw daughters, sisters, friends. They saw the pain in the eyes of the families left behind, the agonizing uncertainty that gnawed at their souls. The weight of their responsibility was immense. They were not just investigating a crime, they were fighting for the memory of the victims, for the hope that their killer would be brought to justice. The investigation was a grueling marathon, fraught with dead ends and false hope. Every lead seemed to evaporate into thin air, every potential breakthrough leading to a wall of frustration. The killer was a master of deception, leaving behind very little to work with. Forensic technology was in its infancy, limiting the investigators' ability to analyze the evidence effectively. DNA testing, which would later revolutionize criminal investigations, was still in its early stages, a distant promise of a future where justice could be served more swiftly. The lack of physical evidence forced the detectives to rely on traditional investigative methods, witness interviews, neighborhood canvassing, and painstaking analysis of crime scene patterns. But the Green River killer was a ghost, his motives shrouded in mystery, his movements unpredictable. The pressure mounted with each passing day, the weight of the unsolved cases bearing down on the investigators. They knew the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again. The hunt continued, relentless but seemingly futile. The Green River killer's choice of victims created a chilling paradox. The very nature of their lives, often lived on the fringes of society, made them both vulnerable and invisible. Their disappearances didn't always trigger the same level of alarm as those from more affluent backgrounds. Many of the victims were involved in sex work, a dangerous profession that often forced them into the shadows. They were daughters, sisters, and mothers, but to the world they were often seen as just prostitutes. their lives deemed less worthy of attention. This societal blind spot played into the killer's hands, allowing him to operate with a chilling sense of impunity. The victims were often reported missing days, sometimes weeks after their last contact with loved ones, hampering the investigation from the outset. The Green River Killer case exposed a harsh truth that some lives were considered more expendable than others, their stories less deserving of headlines. It was a sobering reminder of the inequalities that persisted even in a supposedly progressive city like Seattle. In an attempt to make sense of the seemingly senseless, investigators turned to the burgeoning field of criminal profiling. They hoped to catch a glimpse into the mind of the Green River Killer, to understand what drove him to commit such horrific acts. The profilers, using the limited information available, painted a picture of a cunning and methodical individual. He was likely familiar with the area, comfortable navigating the backroads and secluded areas where the bodies were found. They theorized that he might be a seemingly ordinary man, someone who could blend into society unnoticed. He might have a job, a family, a life that outwardly contradicted the darkness that lurked within. The profile, though helpful in narrowing down the scope of the investigation, also highlighted the frustrating reality of the case. The Green River Killer was a ghost, a phantom who moved through the cracks of society, leaving behind very little to trace him by. The Green River Killer case was never far from the headlines, but as the years dragged on, the media frenzy died down. The public moved on to other stories, other tragedies that captured their attention. But for the investigators, the case remained an open wound. They chased down every lead, every rumor, every whisper in the wind, hoping that it would be the one to break the case wide open. They interviewed hundreds of potential suspects, each interview a potential step closer to the truth, but also a potential dead end. The investigation became a test of endurance, a testament to their unwavering commitment to finding the truth. They knew that even if the killer was never caught, their efforts would not be in vain. They were building a case, brick by painstaking brick, that would one day bring closure to the families of the victims. The Green River Killer might have been able to evade justice for now, but he wouldn't be able to outrun the relentless pursuit of the truth. The investigators were determined to ensure that his crimes would never be forgotten, that the victims would one day have their day in court. As the years turned into a decade, a sense of weariness began to set in. The initial optimism that had fueled the investigation gave way to a grim acceptance that the Green River Killer might never be caught. The detectives, though still dedicated, were haunted by the faces of the victims, by the knowledge that their killer was still out there, somewhere. The families, their grief still raw, clung to hope, but the passage of time had eroded their faith in the justice system. The Green River Killer case had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the limitations of law enforcement and the depths of human depravity. It had tested the city's spirit, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of unease. But even in the darkest of times, even when hope seemed lost, the human spirit found a way to endure. The victims would not be forgotten, their stories lost to the annals of time. The pursuit of justice might have faltered, but it would never truly end. The Green River Killer case wasn't just about a monster hiding in plain sight. It was a harsh indictment of a society that had failed to protect its most vulnerable members. The victims weren't random strangers snatched from well-lit streets. They were women living on the margins, their lives deemed less valuable by a world that looked the other way. Many of them were engaged in sex work, a dangerous profession that often forced them into the shadows. They walked a tightrope between survival and exploitation, their lives a constant negotiation with risk. They were daughters, mothers, sisters, but to the world they were often seen as just prostitutes, their disappearances barely causing a ripple. Their families knew differently. They knew the warmth of their smiles, the hopes they held for a better future. They knew the pain of their absence, the gaping hole left in their lives by a violence that had shattered their world. The Green River Killer case forced society to confront its own complicity in their fate. It exposed the dark underbelly of a city that prided itself on its progressiveness, revealing the hypocrisy of a system that claimed to value all lives while turning a blind eye to those deemed disposable. The investigation itself became entangled in the very societal biases it sought to overcome. The victims' lifestyles, often seen as a matter of choice rather than circumstance, colored the perception of the case from the outset. Their disappearances didn't always elicit the same urgency as those from more respectable backgrounds. Police resources, already stretched thin, were sometimes diverted to cases deemed more worthy of attention. The media, too, played a role in shaping the narrative, often sensationalizing the killer's crimes while reducing the victims to statistics, their individual stories lost in the macabre fascination with the Green River Killer. This societal blind spot created a dangerous dynamic, allowing the killer to operate with a chilling sense of impunity. He knew that the women he targeted were less likely to be reported missing, and even when they were, their cases might not receive the same level of scrutiny. The Green River Killer case became a tragic testament to the consequences of indifference. It demonstrated how societal biases, even unspoken ones, could have life or death consequences for those living on the margins. The media coverage of the Green River Killer case was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it brought much-needed attention to the investigation, putting pressure on law enforcement to solve the crimes and bringing a measure of solace to the families of the victims, knowing their loved ones were not forgotten. But the headlines often focused on the sensational aspects of the case, the gruesome details of the murders, and the elusive nature of the killer. The victims, their lives and stories, were often relegated to the sidelines, their identities reduced to a name, an age, and a photograph on a missing person poster. This approach, while understandable in the context of news reporting, often perpetuated the very biases that had made these women vulnerable in the first place. It reinforced the perception that they were somehow responsible for their fate, their lives less valuable because of the choices they'd made or the circumstances they'd found themselves in. The Green River Killer case became a stark reminder of the power of narrative and how the media, often unwittingly, could contribute to the marginalization of those already pushed to the fringes of society. The Green River Killer case exposed a chilling truth about human nature. That indifference could be just as deadly as any weapon. It was the collective silence, the averted gazes, the unspoken belief that these women were somehow less deserving of protection that allowed the killer to operate for so long. It wasn't that people were inherently cruel, it was that they had become desensitized to the plight of those living on the margins. The women caught in the killer's web were seen as statistics, not individuals with hopes, dreams, and loved ones who mourned their loss. This indifference had a ripple effect, creating a climate of fear and mistrust that made it difficult for the police to gather information and for the community to come together to support the families of the victims. The Green River Killer case became a tragic reminder that justice required more than just laws and law enforcement. It required a society willing to confront its own biases and to see the humanity in every one of its members. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of the Green River Killer case was the tireless advocacy of the victims' families. Their desperate pleas for help often met with indifference or even hostility. They were mothers, fathers, siblings, their lives shattered by loss, yet they had to fight to have their loved ones remembered, to have their stories told. One mother, her daughter among the missing, became a tireless advocate. Her voice hoarse from speaking at press conferences, her eyes filled with a grief that refused to be silenced. She held up a photo of her daughter, her smile frozen in time, and demanded that the city see her not as a statistic, but as a human being worthy of justice. Her pleas and those of the other families shamed the city into action. They forced the authorities to confront their own biases, to allocate more resources to the investigation, and to acknowledge the humanity of the victims. The Green River Killer case became a turning point, a moment when Seattle was forced to confront its own reflection in the mirror and ask itself, what kind of city allows its most vulnerable citizens to vanish without a trace? The Green River Killer case, for all its darkness, also planted the seeds of change. It forced a conversation about the vulnerability of women, particularly those engaged in sex work and the societal structures that perpetuated their marginalization. Advocacy groups, energized by the family's tireless efforts, demanded better protection for sex workers, greater resources for missing persons cases, and a more compassionate approach from law enforcement and the media. They challenged the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex work, highlighting the systemic factors that often left women with few options for survival. The case also led to improvements in how missing persons cases were handled. with a greater emphasis on early intervention, interagency cooperation, and sensitivity towards the families of the victims. The Green River Killer case, while a tragedy, also served as a catalyst for change, a turning point in the fight for social justice and the recognition of the inherent dignity and worth of every human life. In the aftermath of the Green River Killer case, there was a concerted effort to reclaim the narrative, to shift the focus from the killer's depravity to the lives and legacies of the victims. Memorials were erected, vigils held, and scholarships created in their names, ensuring that they would be remembered not for how they died, but for who they were. Families shared stories of their loved ones' kindness, their laughter, their dreams for the future. Artists and writers found inspiration in their resilience, their spirits undimmed by the darkness that had befallen them. The Green River Killer, once a figure of terror, was relegated to the shadows. His name, a reminder of the evil that men do, but not the defining narrative of the lives he had taken. The victims, once silenced, were given a voice, their stories a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a beacon of hope illuminating the darkness, a reminder that even in death, love and memory could triumph over evil. The early years of the Green River Killer investigation were marked by a frustrating truth. The science of catching a killer lagged behind the brutality of the crimes. Forensic technology, still in its relative infancy, struggled to keep pace with the cunning of a predator who seemed to vanish into thin air. Fingerprints, once considered the gold standard of criminal identification, were frustratingly scarce. The Green River Killer, meticulous in his methods, left behind few clues that could directly link him to the crime scenes. Blood typing, while helpful in narrowing down the pool of potential suspects, lacked the precision to definitively identify the perpetrator. Each new victim brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a renewed sense of urgency to find a technological edge in the investigation. The investigators, armed with determination but limited by the tools of their time, found themselves engaged in a race against a ghost, a phantom that seemed to slip through the cracks of a justice system still grappling with the dawn of a new forensic age. The Green River Killer case coincided with a pivotal moment in the evolution of forensic science, a time when the whispers of a DNA revolution were beginning to echo through crime labs across the country. But these advancements, still in their early stages, remained frustratingly out of reach for the investigators hunting a shadow in the Pacific Northwest. DNA profiling, with its promise of pinpointing a perpetrator with unprecedented accuracy, was still in its infancy, its application to criminal cases hampered by technological limitations and legal complexities. The investigators, acutely aware of its potential, could only imagine a future where such tools might unlock the secrets of their case. In the meantime, they meticulously collected and preserved every scrap of evidence, every fiber, every hair, every drop of bodily fluid, knowing that one day these seemingly insignificant fragments might hold the key to unlocking the mystery that haunted them. Each sample represented a silent plea for justice, a whisper of hope that the ghost they were chasing would one day be revealed, not through traditional detective work, but through the cold, hard evidence encoded in the very building blocks of life. While the Green River Killer continued his reign of terror, a quiet revolution was brewing in laboratories far from the rain-soaked streets of Seattle. Scientists, driven by a relentless pursuit of knowledge, were unlocking the secrets of DNA, unraveling the intricate code that held the blueprint of life itself. Each breakthrough, each new discovery brought with it the tantalizing possibility of not only understanding the origins of life, but also of using this knowledge to solve crimes that had long baffled investigators. The potential of DNA technology to revolutionize criminal justice was becoming increasingly clear. What was once considered science fiction, the ability to identify an individual from a single drop of blood or a strand of hair, was rapidly becoming a reality. For the detectives haunted by the unsolved murders of the Green River Killer, this news offered a glimmer of hope in the seemingly endless darkness. They knew that somewhere, hidden within the evidence they had so carefully collected, lay the answer to their prayers. It was only a matter of time before science caught up with justice, before the invisible hand of DNA revealed the face of a killer. As the 1980s gave way to the 1990s, the Green River Killer case remained an open wound on the psyche of the Pacific Northwest. The investigation, though ongoing, had lost its initial momentum, the trail growing colder with each passing year. The detectives, hardened by years of chasing a ghost, refused to give up hope. They clung to the belief that one day the killer would make a mistake, or that science would provide the breakthrough they so desperately needed. They meticulously archived the evidence, preserving it with a care that bordered on reverence, knowing that it held the key to unlocking the mystery. The families of the victims, their grief etched into their faces, endured the agonizing wait for answers. They held on to hope, fueled by the knowledge that the investigators had not forgotten their loved ones, that the pursuit of justice, though slow, was relentless. The Green River Killer might have been able to evade capture, but he could not outrun the march of time, nor the relentless pursuit of truth. The day would come when science would catch up, when the secrets hidden within the very cells of the human body would finally be revealed. The dawn of the new millennium brought with it a sense of both hope and trepidation. The 21st century, with its promise of technological marvels, also carried the weight of unsolved crimes, ghosts from the past that refused to be silenced. The Green River Killer case, a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of even the most progressive cities, was one such ghost. But the same technological advancements that had ushered in a new era also offered a renewed sense of hope for justice. DNA technology, once a distant promise, had matured into a powerful tool capable of unlocking secrets that had long eluded investigators. Cold cases, once considered unsolvable, were being revisited with the knowledge that the answers might lie dormant within the evidence collected years, even decades earlier. The Green River Killer case, with its treasure trove of meticulously preserved evidence, was ripe for re-examination. The detectives, their faces etched with years of frustration and determination, knew that this was their chance to finally bring closure to one of the most haunting cases in American history. The ghosts of the past were about to be confronted with the science of the present. In the early 2000s, the Green River Task Force, resurrected with a renewed sense of purpose and armed with the power of DNA technology, embarked on a mission to finally unmask the killer who had haunted them for decades. The evidence, carefully preserved for years, held the key. Samples from the early victims, thought to be useless at the time of collection, were re-examined using cutting-edge DNA analysis techniques. The results sent shockwaves through the investigation. A match. Finally, a name to the shadow that had haunted the Pacific Northwest for nearly 2 decades. Gary Ridgway, a name that had come up earlier in the investigation, dismissed due to lack of evidence, now emerged as the prime suspect. The seemingly ordinary truck painter, the man who had blended so seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life, was about to be unmasked as a monster. The news of the DNA match sent a collective shiver down the spines of those who had followed the case. The Green River Killer, once a phantom, a figment of nightmares, now had a face, a name, a history. The hunt was far from over, but the game had changed. The arrest of Gary Ridgway in 2001, nearly 2 decades after the first victims were discovered along the banks of the Green River, sent shockwaves across the nation. The seemingly ordinary man, the quiet truck painter, stood accused of being one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The news brought a mixture of relief, anger, and disbelief. Relief that the nightmare was finally over, that the families of the victims might finally find some measure of closure. Anger that it had taken so long, that so many lives had been lost. Disbelief that the man they had arrested, the face staring back at them from the mugshot, could be the monster they had hunted for so long. The arrest was a testament to the perseverance of the investigators, their refusal to give up hope even when the trail seemed to have gone cold. It was a victory for forensic science, a demonstration of the transformative power of DNA technology to unlock the secrets of the past. But most importantly, it was a victory for the victims, their voices, though silenced, finally heard. Justice, though delayed, had not been denied. The Green River Killer had been caught, and the long, arduous journey towards healing could finally begin. With Gary Ridgway's arrest, the Green River Task Force finally had their man. The investigation shifted from a desperate hunt to a meticulous process of building an airtight case against a killer who had evaded justice for decades. The stakes were higher than ever. Ridgway, once a phantom, now sat in an interrogation room, his face illuminated by the harsh glare of overhead lights. His seemingly ordinary life, the facade he had so carefully constructed, was crumbling around him. The detectives, armed with years of accumulated evidence and the irrefutable match from the DNA analysis, began the delicate dance of interrogation. A battle of wits against a man who knew the justice system as well as he knew the back roads where he had disposed of his victims. The air crackled with tension, every word, every gesture, a calculated move in a high-stakes game where the price of failure was not just a conviction, but the possibility of finally understanding the depths of a killer's mind and bringing a measure of peace to the families of those he had silenced. In the confines of the interrogation room, a chilling truth began to emerge. Gary Ridgway, after years of denial, started to talk. He described his victims not as individuals but as objects, their lives reduced to a blur of encounters along the Pacific Highway South. His confession, devoid of remorse or emotion, sent a chill down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. Each horrifying admission brought a mixture of revulsion and a perverse sense of relief that the truth was finally being revealed. As Gary Ridgway's confession unfolded, a moral dilemma arose for the prosecution team. Ridgway demanded a deal life in prison without the possibility of parole, but crucially, no death penalty. The prosecution team faced an agonizing choice: accept his terms and bring closure to dozens of families, or risk a trial and possible acquittal. Some families, desperate for answers, urged the prosecution to accept the deal. Others, consumed by grief and rage, demanded the ultimate punishment for a man who had taken so much. In a controversial decision, the prosecution team agreed to offer Gary Ridgway a plea deal, life in prison without the possibility of parole, in exchange for a full confession and cooperation in locating the remains of his victims. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some hailed it as a victory for justice, a pragmatic approach that prioritized the needs of the families desperate for closure. Others condemned it as a betrayal, a travesty of justice that allowed a monster to escape the ultimate punishment. The plea deal, while offering a measure of closure, also served as a stark reminder that some wounds never truly heal. The courtroom, usually a stage for legal battles, was transformed into a crucible of raw emotion as Gary Ridgway came face to face with the families of those he had murdered. One by one, they approached the podium, their voices trembling with grief, anger, and a profound sense of loss. They spoke of daughters, sisters, mothers, their lives tragically cut short, their dreams forever unrealized. They spoke of birthdays missed, graduations unattended, grandchildren never held. Their words, raw and unfiltered, pierced the sterile silence of the courtroom, a powerful testament to the human cost of a killer's actions. As the victim impact statements continued, a tapestry of grief and resilience unfolded in the courtroom. Each voice, each story added a thread to a narrative of loss and enduring love. There was the mother who spoke of her daughter's infectious laugh, her love of dancing, her dream of becoming a veterinarian. The sister who recounted childhood memories, shared secrets, the unbreakable bond forged in love and laughter. The victims, reduced to statistics in life, were given a voice in death, their humanity affirmed by those who loved them most. After days of heart-wrenching testimony, the moment of reckoning arrived. Gary Ridgway, his face a mask of indifference, stood before the judge to receive his sentence. The judge recounted the horrific nature of Ridgway's crimes, the calculated brutality, the years of deception, the immeasurable pain inflicted on so many families. Then, with a resounding thud of the gavel, the sentence was pronounced: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers, sobs, and gasps of relief. As he was led away, a strange silence descended upon the courtroom, a silence that held within it the echoes of lives lost and justice served. The capture and conviction of Gary Ridgway brought a sense of closure to a community terrorized for decades, but it also forced a long, hard look at the systemic failures that allowed a predator to operate with such impunity for so long. The Green River Killer case became a defining moment for law enforcement, highlighting the need for better coordination and communication between agencies. The Green River Task Force, while ultimately successful, was often hampered by jurisdictional disputes and a lack of centralized information sharing. The case also exposed a deeply troubling bias within law enforcement, a tendency to prioritize cases involving victims from more affluent backgrounds. This systemic neglect allowed a killer to operate in the shadows, targeting those considered disposable by a system that had failed to protect them. The Green River Killer case wasn't just a crime story, it was a societal reckoning. Advocacy groups, energized by the family's tireless efforts, demanded better protection for sex workers, greater resources for missing persons cases, and a more compassionate approach from law enforcement and the media. They challenged the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex work, pushing for decriminalization as a means to reduce violence and exploitation. They called for greater sensitivity in handling missing persons cases, emphasizing the need for early intervention and family support. The Green River Killer case, while a tragedy, also served as a catalyst for change, a turning point in the fight for social justice. The Green River Killer case unfolded at a pivotal moment in the evolution of forensic science, a time when the whispers of a DNA revolution were beginning to echo through crime labs across the country. DNA profiling, once a distant promise, had matured into a powerful tool capable of identifying individuals with a level of accuracy previously unimaginable. The Green River Task Force was able to revisit old evidence with newfound hope, knowing that the answers might lie dormant within the very cells of the victims and their killer. The successful use of DNA evidence in the Green River Killer case had a profound impact on the field of forensic science, demonstrating its ability to solve crimes and exonerate the wrongly convicted. The legacy of the Green River Killer case extends far beyond the courtroom, ushering in a new era of forensic science. The capture and confession of Gary Ridgway provided a chilling glimpse into the mind of a serial killer. But it also raised more questions than answers. Criminologists and psychologists, eager to understand the motivations and psyche of a man who could commit such horrific acts with such apparent normalcy, descended upon the case. Ridgway's confession, devoid of remorse or emotion, painted a picture of a man detached from the humanity of his victims. His ability to compartmentalize his crimes from his everyday life, to maintain a facade of normalcy while harboring such darkness, baffled experts. While the Green River Killer case provided a wealth of data for experts to analyze, it also served as a stark reminder of the limitations of our understanding of the human mind. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Green River Killer case was the ordinariness of the perpetrator. Gary Ridgway, unlike the stereotypical image of a deranged killer, was a seemingly average man leading a seemingly average life. This stark contrast, the banality of evil, forced society to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters don't always announce themselves with obvious signs of deviance. The Green River Killer case challenged our preconceived notions of what a killer looks like and demonstrated that evil can take root in the most unexpected of places. The case served as a stark reminder that we cannot rely on stereotypes to identify those who pose a threat. The Green River Killer case, despite its horrific nature, left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the courtroom. The families of the victims channeled their grief into activism, becoming powerful advocates for those marginalized and forgotten by society. Their efforts led to tangible changes in how such cases were handled, from the implementation of new investigative techniques to the creation of support services for families of victims. The Green River Killer case, while a tragedy, also served as a catalyst for a more just and compassionate society. The memorials, the vigils, the stories shared by loved ones, all serve as a testament to the enduring power of human connection. Section 7. The Unending Pursuit. The Green River Killer case, though officially closed with the sentencing of Gary Ridgway, continues to cast a long shadow. The echoes of loss reverberate through the lives of the families forever marked by tragedy. The memories of loved ones lost a constant presence. The pursuit of justice, while achieving a measure of closure, also revealed the complexities and imperfections of a system grappling with the darkest aspects of human nature. The case serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice is often a marathon, not a sprint, a relay race passed down through generations of investigators, advocates, and family members determined to honor the memory of those lost and to prevent such tragedies from happening again. The Green River Killer case, with its legacy of loss, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth, stands as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, to confront evil, to seek justice, and to find hope even in the darkest of circumstances. It is a story that will continue to be told and retold, its lessons absorbed and its victims remembered, a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice, like the flow of the Green River itself, is a journey without end. Section 1. Echoes on the waterfront. The Green River still flows, a silent witness to a darkness that once gripped its shores. The trees whisper tales of loss and resilience, their roots entwined with memories of those taken too soon. On the waterfront, a memorial stands as a solemn tribute to the victims. Their names etched in stone serve as a poignant reminder of lives tragically cut short. Visitors leave flowers and mementos, tokens of remembrance for those lost but not forgotten. The Green River flows on, a silent testament to a darkness that once threatened to consume a city. Section 2. The evolution of justice. The Green River Killer case, while deeply tragic, catalyzed advancements in criminal justice. It highlighted the need for new approaches, technologies, and a commitment to justice for all victims. The case ushered in a new era of forensic science, showcasing DNA technology's power. It led to reforms in handling missing persons cases, especially for marginalized communities. The legacy of the case influences training, techniques, and the culture of law enforcement. The sentencing of Gary Ridgway brought a measure of closure to a long and painful chapter in the history of the Pacific Northwest, but it also served as a stark reminder that true justice is often elusive, the wounds inflicted by such horrific acts echoing through generations. The families of the victims, their lives forever altered by loss, found solace in knowing that their loved ones had not been forgotten, that their killer had been held accountable for his crimes. But the pain of their absence, the unanswered questions, the dreams shattered by senseless violence, these were burdens they would carry for the rest of their days. No sentence, no matter how harsh, could truly compensate for the lives lost, the futures stolen, the families torn apart by the actions of a single individual. The justice system, for all its complexities and nuances, could only offer a pale imitation of true justice, a legal resolution that could never fully address the depth of human suffering. The Green River Killer case serves as a somber reminder that some debts can never be fully repaid, some wounds never truly heal. It is a testament to the enduring power of grief, but also to the resilience of the human spirit to find meaning and purpose even in the face of unimaginable loss. The Green River Killer case forced society to confront its own biases, its tendency to overlook or dismiss those living on the margins. The victims, many of whom were sex workers or runaways, were often seen as invisible, their lives deemed less valuable by a society that had failed to protect them. In the aftermath of the case, there was a concerted effort to honor their memory not just as victims but as individuals, each with their own story, their own hopes, dreams, and loved ones left behind to mourn their loss. Advocacy groups, families, and community members worked tirelessly to reclaim their narratives, to ensure that they were remembered not for how they died, but for who they were. Memorials were erected, scholarships created, and vigils held to keep their memory alive. Their stories, once silenced, were shared and celebrated, their humanity affirmed in the face of a tragedy that sought to dehumanize and erase them. The Green River Killer case became a catalyst for change, a reminder that every life has value, that every voice deserves to be heard, and that a just and compassionate society is one that sees and protects even its most vulnerable members. The impact of the Green River Killer case extends far beyond the confines of the Pacific Northwest. The case, with its complex narrative of loss, resilience, and the pursuit of justice, has captured the attention of criminologists, psychologists, and storytellers alike, its lessons resonating across disciplines and generations. The case has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and academic studies, each attempting to unravel the mystery of Gary Ridgway's psyche, the societal factors that contributed to his crimes, and the enduring impact of his actions on the families of the victims and the community as a whole. The case continues to be taught in law enforcement academies and criminal justice programs, its lessons shaping the training of a new generation of investigators and forensic experts. The Green River Killer case, in its own tragic way, has become a touchstone for broader conversations about violence against women, the marginalization of vulnerable populations, and the evolving role of forensic science and criminal justice in a changing world. The case serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process, a collective responsibility to learn from the past, to seek answers, and to strive for a future where such tragedies are not repeated. The Green River flows on, its waters a constant presence in a landscape forever marked by tragedy. The trees along its banks stand as silent witnesses, their roots entwined with the memories of those lost but not forgotten. The city, once gripped by fear, has emerged from the shadow of the Green River Killer, its spirit unbroken. The case serves as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the resilience of the families who transformed their grief into activism, and the dedication of the investigators who never gave up hope. Justice, though often delayed, can prevail. The river remembers. Its currents carry the weight of history, the whispers of lives lost and lessons learned. It is a reminder that the past is never truly gone, and so we remember. We remember the victims, their families, and the tireless pursuit of justice. The Green River flows on, a symbol of both the darkness we must confront and the enduring hope that guides us.